This is such an uncomfortable.
Are you in a closet? Are you in a room? Where are you?
My initial setup was on this nightstand, and I was going to be sitting on the bed facing the door, so not the foot of the bed, and like not have a back. But I was like, fuck it, I'll just rearrange the room, and I have got a little stand for my mic that it turns out is way too far, so I have to hold the whole thing, and it's got this like precariously perched pop filter off the back of the mic, and it's super heavy because it's got this weighted bottom right here. It's freaking terrible. So
if you're gonna hold the mic, why don't you take the bottom off? Doesn't that just twist off?
it's such an ordeal. I gotta unrig the whole thing it's clipped to, and like,
Why remove the thing that allows you to complain when you could just complain? That's what I say.
Yeah, I understand. Sometimes you don't want a solution, you just want to complain. I totally get that. I also did appreciate the alliteration of precariously perched pop filter. I'll be remembering that for the rest of this recording.
listen, I hate alliteration, but sometimes you just gotta do it to them.
What? Who hates alliteration?
No, it's just a long time bit that whenever somebody accidentally alliterates, I'm like, no alliteration.
Accidentally alliterates?
Oh, busted. Actually,
Always accidentally alliterating.
always accidentally assinating, since those are
That's
vowels.
me. It's a long time bit. And I'll scream. It's like when I say Glappendorp or whatever, and Nick screams
Whoa,
at me.
language.
Yeah, it's like that. Just a bit. Who knows the origin of it?
You know my students listen to this podcast now, and you just said Glappendorp on the air?
Canceled.
Oh, you're doing the bit. You're doing the bit. You're doing the bit. You're in on
He
it now.
catches on. Yes, anding. Come on.
Part of me was like, oh shit, am I actually saying something offensive? I'm gonna.
Jesus fucking Christ.
He's in on it. Good. I needed that laugh. That was good. I'm a little slow sometimes. All right. What are we talking about today? We doing just shit we've been playing?
Yeah, basically. I scrolled through some of my news sources, and it's dire out there. There's nothing. Everyone is talking about rumors of hardware, which is, evergreen. It is eternal. It is no week without a rumored PS5 Pro or, new Switch or whatever, the Asus handheld thing. It's like a Steam Deck, but more expensive.
Yeah.
Like whatever. It's, it's news technically, but what all can we really glean from that? I don't know.
Fake news.
There's some news that we're not going to talk about.
Shut
But
up.
EJ,
Yeah.
you've been gaming, so I mean, regale us with the tales of your tantalizing technical achievements. I don't know. I'm really trying.
You tried for the alliteration. That's okay. We didn't even properly intro. That's okay. That's whatever.
Don't be such a Glappendorp, Nick.
Whoa.
You talk to your students with that mouth?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing other than like trying to get through Metroid, so we can do our podcast next week or 2 weeks or whatever it's going to end up being. It's going to be a weird week because we're all at the coast together this weekend, and so like who knows what will come of that. But other than the South Park games, I'm trying to like think if there's anything further back that I played that is relevant to talk about. I don't think so. I've been the last like month. I've been up and down and spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house because she's been down for the count, and so haven't been playing as much. But I did bring my PlayStation with me, and I platinumed back-to-back both South Park games. I played The Fractured But Whole, the second game, first, because I played the Stick of Truth like 8 years ago, right? Nick, I know you played Stick of Truth.
Correct.
It was sort of like Paper Mario for adults. We talked a little bit about it on the 100 episode. You kind of gave me shit for even considering it for the top 100. In retrospect, I do not feel bad about bringing it up, given some of the things that made the list.
It could have sat there if you had actually, played it and had a formed opinion on it. But I had just I played it and was like, yeah, that was a good game. But it didn't leave as much of an impression on me as many other games on the list. So I don't feel bad about leaving it off, but it definitely could have sat there. I agree.
Lives in a weird spot for me because, well, first, okay, I'm curious. Are you a South Park guy in general? Did you grow up with South Park in high school? Were you into it? Have you ever been into it?
I didn't grow up with it. I've seen episodes. I've watched it, but I was more into Family Guy than I was ever into South Park. And I wasn't even really into Family Guy. I was more just Futurama is awesome. I watched that on Netflix, but that was the kind of the cartoon comedy, like adult comedy show that I really gravitated towards. South Park I always thought was pretty funny, but I didn't seek it out.
Same.
I love how many times you leaned in just to get that one word in, Chris.
I'm here. I'm paying attention.
So growing up, South Park was always like the forbidden fruit. It's Friday night, so you're staying up a little late and you're flipping through the channels and Comedy Central is on and you're like, shit, I hope mom and dad don't catch me with this on because then they'll make me turn the TV off kind of thing. And like South Park, it's so weird because South Park is not a particularly like evergreen thing. It's really hard to watch an episode from 1997 unless you were really aware of the happenings in pop culture at the time. But the thing about that franchise and the way that they have like come to develop their show, and they're producing episodes literally every week. You know, I think there's the documentary 6 Days to Air. Because of that, it's always sort of touching these hot button issues in society. And so watching newer episodes, things that I've been a little more cognizant of as an adult, really getting South Park, even though like it's still not one of those things that I've dived into super deeply. But for some reason, these games just really appealed to me. I don't know why, because it's just like shitty, pun intended, but like just it's bad fart humor and like a lot of inside jokes at this point because it's been 20 years of this franchise. But I still found myself so addicted to both of these games, and I platinumed both of them in like probably 10 days. So anyway, to set the stage, that's kind of what I deep dived on. Dude, those are like really competent RPGs, and they're quite different. And Nick, I know you had said something about how like the first one is widely regarded as being better than the second one, and I understand why. And I think a lot of that is from people who are like really into the show. But as someone who really didn't have a lot of that background, and playing the second game first, and then going back to the first one, and seeing what a dramatic difference there is, both in like all the game systems, from combat to the upgrade level up system, the buddy system, the way you interface with the world. Both games have different systems for minor platforming, solving puzzles, getting to A to B, and you use all your buddies' different abilities. It was shocking to me what a step back going back to that first game was. But Nick, I know you played the first one, and so you know like the combat was basically Paper Mario. Choose one of your two attacks, basically hit A at the right time, or B if you're doing a heavy attack, and like sort of the active battle system, very simple, like columns of enemies on the other side. The second game did like a grid-based thing, which, was it 2018 this game came out?
Sounds right. I think the first game was like 15 or 16.
I think it was 13.
Maybe even older. Was it? Oh my God. Was it really?
Yeah, I think it was 13.
Son of a bitch.
Dude, I found the combat in the second one to be much more challenging.
Yeah, the first game was not challenging at all. It was more just a thing to do. It was a delivery mechanism for the jokes.
Right. And the battles in the first game didn't overstay their welcome. Like you
Right.
never felt like you were like, oh God, another battle. Like it didn't feel grindy. You kind of just got to go from point to point B, exactly, experience the jokes, experience the story, and then a couple of big boss battles that were more just jokes.
And like references to the show, like fight Man Bear Pig and like that kind of shit. You know, it's exactly
Gore.
what you'd expect. Yeah.
Going back to it after the first one, or the second one, because I thought the second one was a little grindy. I was a little annoyed with the combat, and I was thinking, man, I don't remember feeling this way when I played the first one. I thought the first time I played the first one all those years ago, I was like, this game is like a little too long.
Yeah, I was like, I want to say like 20 hours was my playtime, like around there.
That sounds right. I can't imagine you were going like full completionist, right? Trying to get all the Pokemon and all the friending everybody on Facebook.
I wasn't like, you know, obsessive about it. I didn't sweat what I didn't get. You know, like you were probably following like a guide to make sure you didn't miss the missable ones on the spaceship or whatever.
So for the first game, whenever I'm starting a game with the intent of like platinuming it, I look up the platinum guide just to make sure, like, are there any missable trophies? What's the difficulty? Is it worth my time? What's the estimated time? And if there's no missable trophies, then I'll just go in and play blind and just sort of get that whole experience, right? Which is like how I want to experience my games. Like, Chris, I know we had talked about briefly doing the God of War platinum. I was following a guide for the last collectibles, and dude, that last couple hours was brutal. And there's like no good way to do it, right? Either like reading paragraphs of shit, and you're like, I just need better bullet points. or watching a video.
Did I not send you? There's a website, and God, I think it's IGN, that they have I'm sorry that you're just hearing about this now because I did my platinum. Well, no, I beat you to the platinum, even though I started the game so much later. But IGN's website has a map of each realm that you can select and deselect every single different type of collectible based on the ones you need to look for. And when you click on it, it gives you an image of exactly where it is on the overworld with it circled. And it also gives you a brief text description of how to get to that place. That simplified this immensely for me when I was getting those last couple things.
Yeah, when I was going through it initially, I wasn't really going for collectibles because I didn't think that I would be platinuming the game. I started that game sort of before Warzone died and before I sort of got the bug to start doing that, right?
Oh, that sucks. That's way different then, because you probably had to go back for hella shit. I was going back for
So
like
much.
5 or 6 things. I mean, like
no.
I find a lot my first playthrough because you guys know how I do. Like I'm team side quest forever.
Yeah, God of War was always one of those games that I just want to roll credits on the story. Of course, I didn't realize how much I was missing this time in the side quests, whereas the first game didn't really have that to the same degree. So I'm glad I got to experience the whole game, but I went back and followed a video guide, and he sort of goes through every collectible in random order, not here, go to this place and then go to this path and go to this path. It would crossfade between items, so then I had to reorient and find where it was a nightmare. So anyway, I don't like doing that. So on Fractured But Whole, I just played through the game. Luckily, there was so in the first game, you have to collect every. You're adding friends on Facebook throughout town, right? And you have to get every single one. I think the trophy is there's one that's more popular than Jesus, and then there's one that's more popular than John Lennon, and that's for getting all the friends in town. And there's a ton of missable ones. The second game, you're getting selfies with people, and of course, you're fulfilling certain criteria and doing certain objectives before someone will be willing to take a picture with you, and it's all part of the flavor of this stupid world, but. Thankfully, there was nothing annoying like that. Nothing missable. Everything could be done after the game. Thank God. So I could just do it at my own pace. Combat felt really grindy. It was a lot more difficult because of the sort of grid-based system. And there's new party system where you have a party you can build of yourself and then 3 other superheroes, which is the theme of the second game. And so it's a lot deeper as far as actually having to think about party comp and finding different people who work well together and thinking about boss encounters more sort of methodically. I know I'm all over the map with this game, but there's a end game or post game battle where you fight Morgan Freeman, who runs a taco shop, which I'm assuming is an inside joke on the show. I don't know, but the difficulty spike is extreme.
One does not simply fight Morgan Freeman.
Well, you do. If you fart on him 3 times, he will get mad and attack you. And
is that
sounds reasonable.
Wait, hang on. I have questions. Is that
Yes.
is that mapped to a specific button that you can just fart on the overworld, or is it
Oh yeah,
half the achievements are from farting on things. So I went to Steam and I looked at my playtime. It was 15 hours, so pretty brief. And I got 18 of the achievements, and a lot of my achievements I didn't get were fart related, like farting on 25 animals or knocking over 3 things with a fart. It is asinine in every regard.
asinine?
some of those type of achievements bother me because I want trophies and achievements to enhance the experience, give me another objective, and to me, trophies that require me to do something that I would never do without having to look up a very specific weird thing, or trophies that are just 25 animals or 10 enemies that have already been downed or whatever. And it's not a challenge, and it's not something I would normally do in a playthrough. It's just sort of an obnoxious extra thing. So I don't love that about the first game's trophy list. But anyway, Chris, the whole conceit of this game, the whole mechanic both games are built around, as far as your player character goes, is that he has super ass powers. And in the first game, medieval sort of based cross between an Elder Scrolls
Game of Thrones
and
and Lord of the
D&D.
Rings.
Yeah, exactly. Not D&D, but World of Warcraft. It was sort of what spawned the whole premise of that game. There was a really famous episode in the mid 2000s about World of Warcraft. I've never actually even seen the episode, but I've seen the clips everywhere. It like was such one of those things that was so ingrained in pop culture for so many years. But anyway, so that carries over into this game, and you have more fart powers, and so some of those are used to again interact with and solve puzzles in the overworld, and some of them are just like super attacks that you can use in battle. So anyway, it's just like a silly, raunchy game. It's totally dumb. Like the way that they take all of these tropes from the games that we've spent our whole lives playing, like very seriously, and either outright making fun of them or sort of, I don't want to go so far as to say subvert our expectations because it's not that serious. But yeah, they flip convention on its head in order to like to fuck with it. And that I find funny.
I really liked some of the humor and how smart it was in the first game in particular. When you get to Canada and it literally becomes an 8-bit Dragon Quest / Final Fantasy RPG, and you're like walking around, and it's got like all the sounds and everything. Like that's just so funny, and like it fits in with South Park making fun of Canada for no reason. It's just something to make fun of, and it's funny. Like we all can get in on it. It's not like mean spirited. It's just like, oh, those Canadians are so weird.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that, and again, how much of it was baked into 25 years of the show and how much of it was them just like using video games to make fun of video games, I don't know, but like it's cute. I enjoyed it.
I think it's both, and especially since Matt and Trey were pretty involved with the first one to its benefit and detriment, as far as that game took forever to come out, right? Because it was being made by THQ, and then obviously that happened, and then Ubisoft picked it up, and yeah, I mean, very troubled development. That was another Obsidian joint as well, so they've got a track record of having trouble getting games to the finish line and getting games ripped out from under them.
I remember the first game being way more polished than it was when I went back to it, and of course, contrasting to the newest game, probably had a way bigger budget, way more competent. Literally everything from the graphics to the UI, the battle system, the party system, all the different types of gear. And the way that actually like mattered, it was shocking to me how much better it was. And I remembered what you had said, Nick, about how it's pretty universally understood that the first game was better. And I went and looked at reviews, and you're right. Like Fractured But Whole did not review better than Stick of Truth. I think Stick of Truth's mid-80s, Fractured But Whole is like 83-ish, whatever that means, a 2-point difference. And I wonder if it's just the South Park shtick that sort of grates on people. If you're not like a South Park fan,
I think a sequel to a South Park RPG being another South Park RPG is a little bit less novel at that point.
Right. I adore these games. They're just challenging enough. There's just enough collectibles. If you're a achievement hunter, the trophy lists is really good in the second game. Less so in the first game, unless you're like a real sicko. There's like literally stuff you miss in the first 60 seconds of the game, and if you miss it, you literally have to play the entire game over and 100% it from the beginning. So it's like you really don't want to fuck around if you're an achievement hunter, and make sure you're following a guide. But I would love a third game in this franchise, and I don't know what they would do next. Would it be Star Wars, Star Trek mashup?
Yeah, probably. Because I mean, the whole thing with Stick of Truth, I think it followed like a season of television also that was very based on Game of Thrones, and that being the pop culture phenomenon of the time. I mean, it came out 2014, and then Fractured But Whole, the whole marketing campaign kicked off of Cartman talking about phases of their superhero franchise that they're creating.
Yeah.
Like it's 1-to-1, obviously making fun of Marvel and Disney and that kind of thing. So I guess that's the other big media property. Or they would do a multiverse, like it would be the South Park multiverse, and they would just do multiverse stuff, whatever that means.
Yeah, they could potentially do.
But also,
something.
It's been a long time. I just looked at that. First game came out in 2014. Fractured But Whole came out in 2017. So it's already been 6 years, which is twice as long as the span between those two games, which feels not real.
I think the creators have said that they don't want to do another game unless it's a 3D game, and what that looks like we don't know. Is that who fucking knows? That would be weird.
South Park: The Wind Waker.
Right. We're really leaning into the Elder Scrolls thing, do an open world South Park game. But Yeah, I mean, I really like the story beats of the second one better because it was, something that I'm much more invested in, like outside of video games, or was invested in anyway. But like, yeah, Marvel movies being as present as they have been in my life over the last decade, and they rip them to shred. It's really fucking funny how they everything from like the phases and the way they plan things, and they brought in like there's a whole bit about like it's like a Days of Future Past ripoff, and like you're fucking with time, and I just am a sucker for that kind of stuff, and when it's all tongue in cheek and just giving a middle finger to how serious those types of franchises take themselves, that's great. Nick, do you have any recollection of like your thoughts at the time of the soundtrack in Stick of Truth?
Nothing sticks out. I do not have any memory whatsoever of the music except for it becoming 8-bit when it was in the 8-bit region and that being funny.
Yeah.
But that was
Yeah.
just part of the bit. Like, was it just like some bombastic kind of orchestral kind of vibe? Like, because that was like the thing they were trying to do was like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, that kind of.
Right. They were trying to do Skyrim, basically. And I don't know, I'm of two minds about it. I really love the music in both of these games. It's way better than a South Park game has any right to be. The second game, obviously, being like it's that really modern cinematic, over the top.
Well, staccato violins.
Right. You know what I get when I think of MCU music? I think of like,
Nothing.
well, it's very generic for a reason.
It's a non-factor. It's embarrassing. Like you get to a movie like Civil War at the time, and then later, of course, something like Infinity War and Endgame, where just imagine a world where the scores for these movies aren't so goddamn generic, and we can get like during the big airport fight in Civil War, like strains of Spider-Man's theme when he's swinging in, and strains of Captain America's theme, and strains of Iron Man's theme, and strains of all these things, so that it actually can reinforce the storytelling and not just be like you said, Nick, big bombastic orchestral like schlock. Never been a single good Marvel score.
I mean, they do have that. It's just that none of the themes are distinct and memorable. So when they do what you're talking about, it all just sounds like the same thing because it's like 30 different types of rice. And it's like, well, when you make a big bowl of it, it's just a bowl of rice. Like you don't actually have a meal there.
Soundtrack and score are different, but like you think of something like Thor or Guardians, and you think of the soundtrack, right?
And that's just a playlist.
Exactly.
It's all boomer rock.
Oh, whatever. I thought Civil War in particular had, dude, the Iron Man versus Captain America. I don't know if it's a theme but there's a motif that they revisit a ton in that movie that I think is brilliant. I love the Captain America theme. Like, there's plenty that I can like recall off the top of my head, but we use the term generic. It's samey. Nick, you said it. It's 30 types of rice because it kind of all has to feel like it belongs in the same sort of, I don't want to say like literal the same universe like these characters are in, but like these movies are all coming from the same place and doing the same thing. So they all kind of need to feel like they belong together. But anyway, the South Park games like capture that really well. And then when I went back to Stick of Truth, I was like, oh my God, the soundtrack for this game is so much better. It's so much more subtle. The way Skyrim is, where like Skyrim has some big, bombastic, memorable themes, right? I think a lot of the moments that I remember, other than like the Dovahkiin theme, are just these little motifs that they pepper in as you're exploring the world. And you have this little phrase that gets stuck in your head that happened the one time you went to this location or whatever. And it's just little, like, here's two bars of this little ditty basically. And I thought Stick of Truth did that really well. And overall, it's like a much cuter, much more familiar vibe than like, yeah, the overwhelming orchestral, like trying to be dramatic when nothing's happening kind of thing. I love those games. That's what I'm getting at. A lot of fun.
Yeah, the first one was a lot of fun. I ended up buying the second one on Switch, I think. So it's on the backlog. Play it eventually. How long did you spend with Fractured But Whole?
I could probably look up my exact playtime, how long to platinum. I couldn't have been that long. It was probably 4 days of playing.
17 and a half hours for main story on how long to beat. So that sounds about right. A little bit more bloated than the first game, but more involved combat. So that's probably why.
Way more combat.
That can be a downside.
I think it was one of the things people complained about in the first game is that it didn't feel like the combat was, people prefer the combat from the first game, but I don't think they felt it was consequential enough. And so they overhauled the system to both make you, feel challenged and invested in, both your build and your party members, but feel like you're getting your money's worth. If I want to watch an episode of South Park, I'll watch an episode of South Park. This needs to be an episode of South Park that I'm playing. And so I think they very intentionally expanded on that in the second game. And I think most people, I imagine they would be happy with that. For me, I like that it was more important to the experience, which I really didn't at first a few years ago, but I really came around on it. But I couldn't think of anything that it did worse than the first game, and maybe 10 things it did significantly better than the first game, including the visuals, which I don't know how you could make something as simple as
First
South
game was
Park.
a 360 game, so
Even the aesthetic, the feel of it, the second game was exactly like South Park. Nailed it. I went back to the first game and I was like, oh, this feels like a fan game. This isn't quite right. It doesn't quite, there are a lot of little details that were off about the aesthetic.
Maybe a place and time thing too, that, at the time when you played that, you were saying that you remembered it being more polished than it was, but in 2014, it probably did feel like South Park, because that's what South Park probably felt like with animation in 2014 times.
South Park has not changed since the first episode was actual construction paper, and then pretty much ever since it's looked like I just went back and started watching it, and they have remastered all of their old episodes because they had all of the old files available, so they just basically re-rendered everything in 16:9.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Clearly there is something to remaster, and so The Fractured But Whole, which, great title for fart humor. It's gonna feel more of what South Park is now because of that. Inevitably, it's going to. So that makes sense to me.
I'm sure they learned a lot from making the first game over 5 years and putting out the second game in 3. They had that pipeline sort of figured out at that point.
Right. And they probably had a much bigger budget, but
I wonder how well that game did. Obviously not well enough to do a third, or perhaps Matt and Trey just have enough fuck you money to say no.
well, I know they've talked about we don't want to be doing this show at 60, and they're in their 50s now, and obviously they had a ton of success with Book of Mormon and Broadway and that whole thing. They're clearly capable of doing what they want. So yeah, I mean, and again, they've said they want to do a 3D South Park game. So whether that's in the works or it's sort of a preliminary thing, or who knows if it'll ever come to fruition, but I'm sad that we might not ever get another worthy sequel to this particular set of games. I mean, it's just like Paper Mario, man. First game's a great proof of concept. Second game is just polished and delightful, and then it just dies. It's been dead.
Lose the plot. Get some fun indie games trying to fill that niche, but never quite hits right, in my experience.
Chris, what have you been playing?
Oh, Jesus. I guess it's time to have the Skyward Sword talk that I sort of played footsie with last week.
Okay.
I don't have as much volcano lava left in me a week later. And also, as my loving wife reminded me, it's almost 10 o'clock, and if we can hear the neighbors downstairs having what I could euphemistically describe as a spirited conversation once per week, then they can probably hear me yelling about Breath of the Wild. So I probably shouldn't do that.
Give it right back to him.
I'm gonna. Yeah. So I'm gonna be on my best behavior. But the two big things I've been playing are Skyward Sword, which I finished, and the remake of Resident Evil 2, which I'm not done with yet, but I have a lot of thoughts on. Skyward Sword is just the worst fucking console Zelda, and at this point, I played every console Zelda except for Twilight Princess. There's no fucking way Twilight Princess is worse than this. There's just not.
No.
It is the laziest Zelda in terms of literally one moment where I reran a dungeon to get an item at the very end of the dungeon, and I was like, are you kidding me? You couldn't design an environment for me to do this? And just a lot of backtracking into this in the same fucking areas with a lot of gimmicky crap to make it.
You don't like backtracking, bro?
Don't put words in my mouth.
Chris, can I see your face? I'd love to see you when you're talking.
Look, this is the only setup that is comfortable. You don't get to see we're doing the Warriors up in fucking Kentucky right now. You just get the mic in my mouth. Anyway,
All right, brothers and sisters.
hey, all you boppers. Also, John Wick 4, so fucking good and has an homage to the Warriors, an extended homage to the Warriors.
Nice.
Holy shit, that movie's good. We'll talk about that at the beach this weekend. Just the reuse of areas where you are not. It's different. It's different than Metroid, EJ, son of a bitch. It's not that I'm having to go back and, I get to discover new things now. I've discovered all the fucking things. It's that they didn't want to build additional parts of the environment to interact with, so they just recycled them and gave you a really stupid, gimmicky way to interact with them again. That for me just didn't cut any ice. Like in the Farron Woods, when you go back and you're looking for the piece of the Triforce, they flood it and you have to go get all the like music notes that make up this Dragon Guardian's piece of the Song of the Hero. And I'm like, I almost like put my fucking controller down. I was like, I'm done. I'm just going to watch the rest of YouTube. I'm done. Except that I had realized, I'm close to like finishing all the console Zeldas. That's kind of fucking cool. So I stuck with it. So that's the big negative to me, is that you retread the same areas with very little difference a lot. They send you the same areas. The whole like, I'm in the sky is literally, it's not even like Wind Waker in the sky, which I'm on record a number of times as saying like it's a very barren, empty, largely uninteresting world. It's worse than Wind Waker because there's not anything you can really meaningfully interact with up there outside of like hitting the goddess cubes down on the surface world with a skyward strike so that you can come open a treasure chest that is more than likely just going to be 300 rupees that you can't use because your wallet is always full because they don't give you a lot of like meaningful shit to spend your money on. It's like the worst currency management of any Zelda even, and Zelda generally is like terrible with currency management because it's like
They still haven't figured it out.
better hope you have a gigantic wallet, or this is just a giant waste. So all that stuff's going on. I turned the motion controls off. The first summer I played this game when it came out in 2021, I was like, you know what? I tried the motion controls. I was like, this is awful. It wants it to be a Wii Motion Plus where it can tell that me pulling my hand down before swinging is not me swinging in a way that the Joy-Con cannot, which meant that I would move my hand in order to swing the sword and it would swing in the exact fucking opposite direction I wanted it to. I was dying in the tutorial dungeon with these shitty fucking motion controls. So I turned them off. It was better, but also there's just a lot of jank because your right stick is then mapped to the fucking sword. And so I'm like waggling my sword around, hitting enemies with these like clearly directionally specific like weak points. And then I have to like hold R1 or L1 in order to move the camera with the right stick. A habit which has not served me well, carrying over into Resident Evil, which has twin stick controls. So that's all like the bad stuff is like, okay, this is clearly a Wii game. It was clearly designed to use all these motion controls. I have to imagine they spent so much of their time exploring all that stuff. They were like, we don't have new environments to design for all of this. So we're going to just literally like flood the Farron Woods instead of giving you a new area to go like search for something substantive. All that being said, a couple like absolute like S tier bosses, like Galactos, the big like mechanoid with the 6 arms and the like big ass scimitars that you fight in the desert. Amazing boss design, and took great advantage of the that dungeon specific weapon, the old Zelda thing of, okay, I got the whip in this dungeon, so I have to use the whip against the boss, etc. Of like ripping 3 of his arms off and then getting to pick up his like gigantic like arm length scimitar that's like bigger than Link is and just bash the shit out of him with it. It's a great fucking boss. Some of the dungeons were all like very bite-sized, which I didn't mind, but I did note that I was kind of like, man, these are really short. And again, I don't mind it because I'm playing this game so that I don't have Tears of the Kingdom FOMO, which after seeing the special edition Switch, I was like, boy, howdy, that concern was justified. Like the in the Sand Sea, the dungeon, the Pirate Chimp dungeon, I was like, this is tight. And the whole mechanic in the dungeon world broadly of the time reversion stones, where striking these like specific stones will revert the area that they cover to a previous time frame, which like activates certain devices that will help you, activate certain barriers that you can't pass. And so just the way that they designed those dungeons, especially where it's like, oh, there's like light coming through the ceiling in this room specifically. Ooh, I bet I can see the time reversion stone that's up on the deck, like attached to the mast of this pirate ship. Cool. And just toggling back and forth. Like it's just really good, a really, really good dungeon design. That one specifically was a highlight.
Nick, how far did you get? I think I asked you this last week. How far did you get in this game?
I played up a few hours. I got to the entrance of the first like real dungeon. So basically what Chris is talking about with the tutorial dungeon, I'm assuming, where you talk to those weird little freaks, you have to gather the small freaks for the big freak, and then you get into the forest temple.
Yeah, that's a great summary.
There you go.
Yeah. And then like the last dungeon is just literally like a mega mix of all of the other dungeons, where they do this like, basically Dampy's dungeon building mechanic from the Link's Awakening remake, where you're like slotting different tiles in, where there's like a tile that's from this dungeon and a tile that's from this dungeon, and only in certain places can you shuffle the tiles around. Where I was like, this is a cool conceit, but it feels like y'all problem solving again because you couldn't afford to build a real fucking dungeon and you just wanted to like reuse assets that you already had and find a shtick to make it work. So that was really frustrating. It was cool to like see the lore of sort of the origins of everything. And EJ, I'm not going to get into it because I know you don't want to be spoiled, and I respect that.
You'll watch a video like over the weekend, so it's fine.
I probably should, because I'm not going to play it before.
Yeah, you don't have time. You don't have time and you don't have patience. EJ, avoid this fucking video. Avoid this game. You don't want to play this game. You're just going to be mad, and I can't in good conscience recommend it to anybody other than like Zelda diehards. It's like a 7.5 for me, to be totally honest.
I literally cannot imagine a world in which EJ would play this game.
No, I can't. I cannot.
He doesn't even like the good Zeldas.
Really? Yeah, most of the widely acclaimed Zelda games I can't fucking stand. They're just boring and tedious. Breath of the Wild is the best Zelda game though, right ahead of Wind Waker. Anyway, so why is it that sorry, 3D Zelda games, 2D Zelda games I don't have enough experience to speak on.
Thank you.
So why is it that, and this is probably, I guess it's probably just the way that the EPD teams work, I don't know, but like Metroid, which we won't dive into, but like we've all been playing this last couple weeks, is an extremely competent remake, and it's a franchise that doesn't sell particularly well. They shadow dropped it, so they obviously didn't believe in it to any extreme degree. So like, why did they make such a loving remake, and then we're getting Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword just janky ports that have had almost no work done, maybe a little control rework, but like not meaningful enough. I just don't understand their thinking as a company.
Nintendo gonna Nintendo is the fact of the matter. If you think something is a smart decision, they're going to do the exact opposite. If you think that something makes sense, they're going to do the exact fucking opposite. They're incompetent and they don't know what their fans want. They don't. They're Skyward Sword is such a lazy port. It is ugly. It is literally a Wii game on my Switch with different controls. It is disgraceful, to be completely honest with you, in terms of calling this like Skyward Sword HD. That is a joke. That is a joke.
Same with the Mario collection. So much potential there to refresh those games in a meaningful modern way. And they just say, well, people are going to buy it anyway. Let's make it a limited time thing and trick people into giving us their money quick.
Yeah, and Metroid Prime, as you said, not only it's beautiful. They made it sound better than it already did, and it already sounded incredible. Gave us a completely different control scheme, like remapped the controls for us. Gave us like 3 different control options. Yeah, no, I don't get it. It just makes absolutely no fucking sense. So that is something, Skyward Sword is something that I suffered through, and that is done now and is out of my backlog. It is back in its case and put into my game drawer, and I never have to. It's never going to be able to. It's never going to be able to hurt me again.
Yeah,
it's really weird to me that Skyward Sword, they commanded a $60 price tag when both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess were $40. And then now this Metroid Prime remaster is also $40. Like, I kind of get it with something like Link's Awakening. Like, that was a whole new visual style. Like obviously it's like the bones were there. They just copied the design of the original game and put a new skin on it. But I don't understand necessarily the justification behind Skyward Sword. Like, yeah, they had to translate motion controls into a stick, but that's not $20 extra on top of that. And they made it 60 frames, and that's nice. But like, yeah, you should be able to put a Wii game and a GameCube game in 60 frames. They even did that with the Mario 3D collection. Like, but I don't know. It's weird.
They're exploiting us because they know that the only way to play this fucking game is on a Wii with a Wiimote, and nobody wants to do that because it's stupid. Like that is why they charge $60 for this, is because they knew that they could, because people wanted to play this game not on a Wii.
Yeah, it's just weird though, because I mean the same thing could have been said to Twilight Princess and Wind Waker. They were trapped on the GameCube and Wii, and like, yeah, you literally could pop in a Wii disc version of Twilight Princess on the Wii U. It wasn't an access problem for that. They could have sold the game as is on the eShop. I mean, they did that with Metroid Prime or Trilogy. Like, you buy those. I bought that game on the Wii U. So it's just weird where they draw the line as far as what is worth it to them at 40 and what's worth it to them at 60. And now Tears of the Kingdom is 70. Like, they know people will pay for Tears of the Kingdom. Like, that's not a problem. Like, we know what we're getting. They know what they're selling. That at least makes sense in my head. But Skyward Sword for 60 in 2021 felt steep then, feels even worse now after Metroid Prime.
You know what's funny to me about, like, as far as Zelda remasters go, is like Wind Waker being probably the only Zelda game that didn't need a complete rework, and that was completely rebuilt from the ground up. Every asset of that game was remade for the remake. It was not a port in that sense.
There wasn't a lot of assets in that game. They remade that game in a year.
Right. And the simple aesthetic, like, you know, obviously made for a good proof of concept for what they were trying to build, but they completely from the ground up remade that game. They implemented awesome motion controls that totally worked. And I'm not a motion control guy. And they like fixed a lot of some of the minor things that people griped about in that game. And Chris, I know we've briefly talked about it, but like, you know, your
It's
complaint
me, I'm
that,
people.
right. Well, even people who loved the game, like, were like, yeah, the final fetch quest is like a little annoying. And
If they ported to Switch, they need to fix the look and version, because that made it very difficult for me to play.
was there not an option for that?
If you inverted the camera, it would like uninvert the first person view. It was something weird like that, where it was like they were disconnected from each other. So no matter what, you got the worst of both worlds.
I forget you're one of those guys who flips your axis like a weirdo.
It's just a regular, up and down inverted. I've heard of people who play with the x-axis inverted as well, which is like,
Kooky.
that's a step too far.
That's
I
crazy.
can't do that. I get it, but like I can't
That's crazy.
imagine
That's
playing
crazy.
like that.
I played the infamous games on PS3 with double inversion. And I could not tell
my
you
God.
I could not tell you why, just for whatever reason. I've never done it since. That particular game, for some reason, just made the most sense to my brain and my body in that moment in time with double inverted controls. Can't explain it.
It was just a phase. You got better.
I think about this because, like, Nick, we've obviously at length discussed like how you like to flip your vertical camera controls, and people argue about this online. Like, you see it a couple times a year on the subreddits, whatever, and like, it's weird because even though I think it's insane to want an inverted y-axis like during normal gameplay, as soon as I get into a vehicle, or like when I was playing Spyro and I was flying during the flying levels, instantly need to invert the controls.
Flight controls.
But like, I don't play flight sim. Like, why is that so ingrained in my brain in a way that like normal 3D movement, I reject it so readily? Like, I don't understand why that binary exists and why it makes sense.
I think something happens in your brain when you're currently inside of a vehicle. Like, you feel like you're in a vehicle, that when you are operating the stick, you're not thinking of it as up and down. You're thinking it as back and forward on the stick. So when you pull back, you're pulling up, and that's like, that makes sense in a vehicle, but that just makes sense to me all the time. That's
Yeah,
how I
yeah.
control these games. Like, I'm not looking at the stick. Like, I'm not looking at the controller top down. I'm looking at it like it's in front of me. I don't know. I mean,
Sure.
it kind of loses all mental sort of gymnastics when you talk about the X axis and inverting that, because obviously, like, people talk about having the stick on the back of someone's head, like you pull it down to make them look up, but in that aspect, also you'd push it left to make them look right, and I can't do that. I mean,
That's crazy.
control inside of houses, and that's why it was impossible for me to ever look around people's houses because it'd be inverted x-axis. It's nightmare fuel to me.
So weird.
I do want to get back to Skyward Sword sometime because I can suffer through a mediocre game. I loved the music. I mean, it wasn't like top 10, music of all time or anything, but I mean, I like having that vibe. It's good shit. I love all the Zelda soundtracks are all good, so I can at least content tourist my way through. Those games are never difficult, so it's just a matter of doing the thing and taking the time out. And it seems like one of the longer Zelda games as well, which is unfortunate. Chris, you do need to play Twilight Princess. You would love the dungeons a lot.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to it. I feel like it's only a matter of time till it comes to Switch. My buddy Nate, who's a frequent mention on this podcast at this point, sent me, when I finally entered my 3D Zelda phase in the summer of 2016, his GameCube disc of Wind Waker and his Wii disc of Twilight Princess to keep. Because he has the HD version. So I have those. I would rather, it was great. Because he's like, dude, this is tight. You're finally playing 3D Zelda. So I was always a 2D Zelda guy. And then in one summer, I played Ocarina finally, and I was like, okay, I think it's time. Anyway.
I've got a spare Wii U that I will let you use for an indeterminate amount of time if you want to play Twilight Princess the best way, which is on the Wii U. And I would even beg of you to play Wind Waker, but you're too close to Wind Waker to play the HD version, probably.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that.
It's the best way to play Twilight Princess, though.
I would need to be in the right headspace. Frankly, I would need to not have anything else that I would rather play to go back to do the Wind Waker HD. But I do want to give it a try for you both, especially you, EJ, but for both of you, just to see if I could sand some of the edges off my opinion of this game, which, again, I played on GameCube in like 2017.
Well, that was 6 years ago. Okay. The biggest problems with that game, because when you tell me like, oh, the map is just so giant and empty, and I'm like, I just do not remember it that way. Like on every map tile, there's a place to go, and half of those places have like mini dungeons in them.
I think a lot of it too is that there's only like 4 real dungeons in the game. So it feels like the pacing of it is very spread out. Like they're very big dungeons, but they're few and far between. Where,
Sure.
Chris was just talking about in Skyward Sword, there being more dungeons, but then being more brief. And I think pacing is a difficult thing to nail in a Zelda-like, especially that old school sort of version of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the HD version, you have not only the quick sales or whatever that literally make you go twice as fast through the world,
Yeah,
but
that's a
also
great quality of life improvement because it is so ponderously, horribly slow on GameCube.
Didn't they also like hotkey a bunch of your melodies that you would do, your ballads, so that you didn't have to like literally put in the fucking code every single time?
That sounds right. Yeah, I think with the gamepad.
Oh,
and
man,
just having the
that's
gamepad
nice.
map was also really nice.
Oh, so nice, dude. And the
EJ
motion controls. What's up?
Why do you have a spare Wii U?
So very, very recently, my little brother, 14-year-old brother, decided he did not want his Wii U or any, his Amiibo and his Disney Infinity, all this shit. So my mom basically packed everything up and sent it to me. And it's not like really worth selling yet.
What we need to talk about what Amiibo were in that box.
Oh, he was way more into Skylander and Disney Infinity. He had a lot of Disney Infinity. Not Amiibo, the only ones that were, I kept 2 Zelda ones for Tears of the Kingdom. I think I kept a Bokoblin and Breath of the Wild Link. And then he had like a couple of broken Mario ones. And I sold the Mario ones. I still have a broken Bowser, I think, but like nothing spectacular.
Okay. Well, I mean, they're all like window dressing for me. So I was just like, oh, if it's like, Smash characters I like that I don't have yet. I wanted to have like all my mains, and I don't think I quite. Yeah, exactly, Nick. Exactly. Everyone is here. We should talk about that Wii U also because I do not have a Wii U because it was a divorce casualty. And I would love to have one because it is the only Nintendo console other than a Virtual Boy, because I'm not independently wealthy at this time, that I don't own.
Well, I mean, once you have hundreds of hours to fall down the Xenoblade rabbit hole, then one of those games is stranded on the Wii U and may never get off of it. So I'm sure Joey would love it if you played Xenoblade Chronicles X.
Oh, I know he would. I know he would.
Is that the only major and noteworthy title that is still stranded on that console, other than the Zelda remakes?
At this point, from first party, yes, unless you want to count like the NES remixes and like the smaller kind of, I would even put Nintendo Land in that category for Chris, but you can't really put that on Switch because it's so dependent on the. I mean, it would have to be like a multiplayer only game.
Yeah,
and we can only imagine how bad that would work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you would need to do Nintendo Land on the Switch. You would need to have like a dedicated like Switch Lite as a controller, just because the whole shtick of those mini games is having it like 1v4 basically. Most of them
with 2 screens.
Yeah. And God, that game is so much fucking fun. I know we're trying to downsize the shit we're bringing to the beach, but like
EJ is going to bring Nintendo Land.
I'm already in Portland. It's can't happen.
Damn it!
I have a copy of Nintendo Land.
What about Drew? Oh, you got a Nintendo Land? Okay, great. No, please,
I have
like
a copy,
just.
yeah.
I swear to God, no, bro. No, I'm telling you, bro. Like
so
Nintendo Land's great, bro. It's great, man. It's great multiplayer, bro. You just gotta give it a chance, bro. Listen to me, bro.
Oh, I know. I had to on the episode 100, man. You were making a case for Nintendo Land.
It's so
and Nick
fun.
Was like, no, not gonna happen.
Please, someone bring Nintendo Land, please.
Pretty sure my copy is sealed.
Ooh.
Okay, let's text Drew. I know that he's got his Wii U still. Leaf probably does soon as a pack-in game, so they all have it. You sealed, really? You bought the console and you're like, fuck this pack-in game, and you just left it in the cellophane? That's sick.
The reason I bought the Wii U was the day Smash Bros. 4 came out. What do you think I was going to do? Play Nintendo Land?
Well, I'm sorry. I bought it close to launch. So that's
did I.
what
That was
there
like 2 years after it came out.
Smash what? No, Smash 4 came out. No, I bought it close to the Wii U launch, not close to Smash launch.
I know, but 2 years after launch is like pretty close.
No, it's not fucking close at all. That's 2 fucking years. You could have been drinking in Nintendo Land, the glory that is Nintendo
Oh, yeah,
Land.
I missed all those wonderful Wii U games like Nintendo Land.
You guys ever play Zombie U?
Oh, man. That
I
sure
know you
is
did.
That sure is a $1 game at GameStop. Anyway, speaking of zombies, what a great segue. I want to talk about Resident Evil really quick. And I'm not done with it. I just, I never played Resident Evil 4. And so when they announced the remake last year, I was like, I can finally play this game. And my buddy Nate mentioned number 2, big Resident Evil guy. He's played every core entry, most of the spinoffs. He hasn't played 6 because of how badly it reviewed. But I was telling him we should do some couch co-op some weekend for that, just like knock it out, or a hot seat or whatever. Was like, if you're going to play 4, you really should play the remake of 2. Because there's a lot of information contextually that would be of service to you, because that's Leon's first game. And he was like, oh my God. He's like, as it so happens, it's on sale for $10 right now on PlayStation Network. And I was like, I'll bet. Like, I've got $10. So I plopped $10 down, bought the Resident Evil 2 remake. I'm not a Resident Evil guy. This is my first core Resident Evil experience. I couch co-opted 5 like 15 years ago with a buddy. And that is literally just a first-person shooter that happens to have zombies. This is a very fucking different experience that game was. And I did not expect to like this game as much as I am liking it. It's so moody and
It's like a puzzler?
Yeah, yes, I mean it is the true definition of survival horror, where you are in this location, you have to puzzle your way out. There's a number of puzzles that are like approachable, relatively challenging. Resources are extremely scarce. And these are not zombies that you shoot in the head and they're dead. You have to be really fucking mindful of how much ammunition you use against zombies, or you will just not have bullets. And I'm really grateful that Nate was like, I'm just going to tell you right now, because I know you're going to have a bad time if you don't do this and you don't know to do this, and then you're going to quit. And I don't want you to quit because I want you to play these games. Shoot a leg off. Because you literally are not going to be able to kill these zombies. You're not going to have enough bullets. But you like blow one of their legs off and you turn them into crawlers. You can navigate those environments with them crawling if you're mindful. but holy shit, it looks great. It plays really great. I'm stressed all the time and I love it. Like it's such a weird sensation for me who's like never been a horror guy to just be like, oh, in the first night I played with these Sony headphones that I'm wearing right now, which have surround sound. And so I was hearing in 360-degree real time, like the direction that shit was coming at me, which was awesome. And also I never did it again because I was like, this is making me so much more anxious. But oh my God, like just being stalked around, you know, the police station by Mr. X and like hearing those like big footsteps and just knowing, fuck, like I literally cannot do a goddamn thing to this guy. Like I can stun him with a headshot if I put the headshot on target. Otherwise, he's just going to knock me to the ground and take a big fucking chunk of my health off. God, I'm having such a fucking good time with this game. I'm shocked. Like, I really thought this would be a slog that I was going to have to just like suffer through to get to Resident Evil 4. But I'm really liking it. I'm in the sewers right now, which is the second major area. I just got the trophy for, and I will not be platinuming this game as an aside because it requires you to do some absolutely insane shit. Like
You have to do multiple playthroughs, but more than that,
That's annoying.
like never accessing the item storage box in an entire playthrough is a trophy. Playing through.
So you started with Leon, the Leon playthrough then?
Yeah, I'm only gonna do Leon. I'm gonna do Leon, and
Okay,
when I finish the game, I'll watch a YouTube video of Claire's A run, and then I'll do Leon's B run probably. But I might just YouTube that so that I can see the true ending. Going into Resident Evil 4, it just depends on how I feel because I know there are differences in the B run. Nate said that like first playthrough in the A run is going to take like 18 hours probably, which tracks with my own experience. And the second one will take like 8. And I'm kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, see how you're feeling when you get there.
Yeah, exactly. And I am enjoying myself a lot.
It's a different play style with Claire versus Leon as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. I know that there were some like massive differences between their routes that like Mr. X only appeared in Claire's B route run. And now he's in every run, every time.
They totally changed up how that game works. A lot of the cues that they took were directly from Resident Evil 4, especially the camera perspective. And
oh, the third person instead of the fucking dreaded tank controls. Like, thank God for that.
I mean, dude, it was a PS1 game. There was no way to do an over the shoulder kind of. I mean, that was pretty much invented by Resident Evil 4 in 2005, and that's what really changed the trajectory for third person shooters afterwards.
Most def, like a seminal game, which is why I was like, oh my God, I can finally play this game.
I'm surprised you hadn't played any Resident Evil games. I mean, it seems like total Chris bait, just that moody atmosphere and like the camp and the over the top horror and like the oppressive tone.
Oh, I'm a chicken shit.
It seems like, well, I mean, yeah,
I'm a fucking coward. I didn't even watch horror films until literally Hereditary.
Huh. Yeah, I wouldn't have marked you as that. I mean, I know EJ is a total wuss, but I didn't think that would be something that you would also be in that category too.
Yeah, but not in my adult life, not in my like late 20s and getting into my 30s, where I enjoy it a lot more, and I can enjoy it for what it does and the craft that they take to affect me in this way. Where I'm literally like yelping like a kicked dog every 5 minutes and then just like laughing and just having a great time going like, damn, they got me so good of like,
God, it's traumatic, dude. I don't understand the people who get off on that. Like, I just need to feel something, dude. I go to bed thinking about that shit. I can't do it.
Chris, EJ can't even watch Stranger Things because it's too scary.
I've watched all of Stranger Things. I just can't watch it before bed. And I put it off for a lot of years because Sarah would watch it. And I'm like, dude, there's like demons coming from the pit of hell and like gooping everywhere. I can't do this. And then I finally got into it, but I was like, all right, we have to cut off at like 8 p.m.
Bro, I respect you and I respect your boundaries and I love that for you. And you will not like these games. Don't play these games.
Fuck
but
no.
it's God. It's just about like, I mean, I don't carry it with me as a big thing. I do not have like a vivid like nightmare imagination in terms of like things that if I go to bed with scary things that I'll have scary dreams. I don't get that. I don't get that. Personally, I don't.
So lucky.
Oh, no, it is because I literally the first major I played like an hour the first time I played with the headphones. And then Tiff was out of town last weekend for an audition in South Carolina. And so I was like, Friday night, it's just literally, I slammed out all my grading so that I could just hang out and play and like clean up around the house and stuff. And I played for like 5.5 straight hours. And I do not know the last time I sat down with a game and just played 5.5 straight hours. Like even Hades, I don't think I did that much consecutive playtime where I just really sank into that game and I couldn't stop. I was like, I'd get to a typewriter and check my watch and go, I can get to the next typewriter. And I keep playing. I go, I can get to the next typewriter. And then it's like 1:45 in the morning. And I'm like, I like kind of have to go to bed now. And what a perfect time to have my first real Resident Evil experience in the dead of night, all alone in my apartment. With a storm outside, like we were gonna maybe get tornadoes, and so I'm like already on edge because I'm like I might have to like grab the cats and jump in the bathtub, and I'm playing Resident Evil, and it's like rainy and moody outside. I'm like, God damn, like this is literally the perfect, like the universe just opened a little beacon of light and just went like, this is for you, like you get this. So I'm loving it, and I'm excited I want to play this whole series now. I own the remake of the first one from when it was free on PlayStation Plus forever ago. I will have to re-up my subscription to access it, but I'm willing to do that. I'll play 4. I heard the remake of 3 was not great, but I'll play that. I've already beaten 5. I can do 6 with Nate sometime, hot seat at one weekend. And I actually did play a little bit of 7, like the first hour of 7 on PSVR with my buddy who wanted to record me responding to this game as a non-horror player for his YouTube channel. Fucking
You were content
hilarious.
for the dinner table.
Oh my God, I was content. I was yelling. I was swearing. I was like, fuck this, fuck that. Like there's one thing about like playing Resident Evil and being like, oh my God, I'm going to open this door and I know something is going to try and like jump and get me. And it's another thing to have a fucking VR headset and headphones on and to be staring down into a dark basement where weird fucking sounds are coming out of and trying to tell my brain, this isn't real. We can totally go down there. It's fine. And my brain's like, the fucking hell we are. Like, no, you are not going down there. But it was so visceral. And I can't remember if I talked about this in a guest spot in the podcast before, but it was like, it made me realize the potential of VR for storytelling in games, where I was like, this is so much more potent than me just holding a controller looking at a screen would be. But I want to play 7. I want to play Village. Like I have the bug. I have the T virus. I'm infected. I want to play all of them.
Nick, you're not a Resident Evil kind of guy, are you?
I've only played a little bit of 4 on the Wii at a friend's house.
The Wii.
The Wii version of Resident Evil 4 is widely regarded as an excellent version of that game.
Really?
So I will not handle this slander.
Okay.
It was until now the definitive version of that game.
Yeah. So that was fine. I have not owned any of them really on my own. So I don't know. I've never had like the urge to go play them. I've just sort of accepted them as being part of video game canon as far as their importance and their place. But yeah, I haven't actually gone and played them myself. EJ, have you I'm just thinking about other like horror type games that I've played and stuff that I've tried to get you to play. Like Dark Souls is sort of like horror. It's creepy. It's weird. It's gross. It's hard. It's tense. It's very tense. It's a very tense game.
Yeah.
Suspenseful in a lot of ways in its action, but maybe not as much in its tone. But EJ, did you ever play any of BioShock? Because I would classify BioShock as like a horror game in some regards.
That was maybe 2013 when I was playing through BioShock for the first time. I put a good couple hours into it. I don't know how far I got. It's been so long. But the way people talked about it, and it was considered at the time, and maybe still is, like one of the greatest games ever. And I had this FOMO that, I had a lot more back when I was a younger man than I do these days. But I was like, I have to play this game. Brennan, it was one of his favorite games. So I played through a couple hours and I didn't know it was a horror game. Like I was, I had a friend I used to play music with. I remember the first time we talked about video games, he like literally ranted about that game for like an hour about the world building and like, I didn't I didn't fully grasp that it was a legitimate horror game. It is extremely moody, but that could mean a lot of things. And so you get in and there are like fucking sewer people stalking you and like body parts. And I was not expecting it. I remember still the last day I played it. And I found some audio log in a room where they had like been doing surgery or something. And there was like water on the floor, and I was just like, this is gonna fuck me up. And I went to work that night and I was like, I'm never playing that game again. I never played it again. Yeah, but I appreciate like a lot of what every game does now, BioShock did first. So I respect its place, but I'm just a scaredy cat.
Well, it's on our list, so we're gonna have to play it at some time.
Oh
Chris is gonna make us play it.
I played through with Brennan. We played The Quarry together. We played Until Dawn together. And Until Dawn was fun. We just kind of passed the sticks and we just were like literally lights off, crammed on that couch together in the dark.
That's something that I texted you about, EJ, is I was like, I'm having such a good time. And I could just imagine how fun this would be just with a late night with the buddies, like playing this game and just like laughing at whoever's playing, getting like jump spooked by whatever the fuck is like crawling around the sewers. Speaking of the sewers, which is just, oh my God, they're so fucking disgusting, like intestinal looking things. And they're like pulsating. And there's this enemy that like
lickers
sits. Oh my God. I literally was like the cat meme. Well, there's a lot of cat memes, but like the big eyed, like cat meme. Yeah. The one cat meme that exists on the internet. I
love that one.
I heard, I heard it for the first time and I literally froze just staring at it and like didn't move, didn't shoot, and was just like, I know that I can get past this if I'm really quiet, if I'm very, very quiet. So I need to be very, very quiet. And at a certain point, I finally was like, fuck. Well, as soon as I'm like, okay, there's a hallway with a liquor in it and Mr. X is stalking me at the same time. And I'm like, I cannot do both of these things at the same time. Fuck you. I'm just shotgunning your ass to death. It felt really good that I had no fucking shotgun shells for like a hot minute. Anyway, this is not the point. The point is, like, it will be such a fun social experience to, like, play these games with other people and just respond together, be spooked together, be successful together. It made me feel like weekend sleepovers in a way that, like, I haven't felt in a really long time, even just being by myself.
I think I talked about it on the podcast before, but we got into Phasmophobia last year. Which is just like it's like a indie game where you're like ghost hunting, and you're just exploring these environments and trying to deduce like what kind of ghost is haunting this place. It's a cheeky little puzzler, but like it's pretty scary. The first couple weeks we played that game, and of course I'm alone in my office with my back to the door, so you don't know like when Sarah's gonna walk through and tap me. I can't hear anything. And the sights and the sounds in that game were even Brennan would shriek like a scared schoolgirl, like shriek, like shrill top of his lungs. And like his roommate would get in the Discord and be like, "Shut the fuck up," because like he's upstairs trying to sleep or whatever. But yeah, when it's with people, I'm more apt to experience it. When I think of all the horror movies that I've seen in my life, Saw 3, either The Grudge or The Ring, I can't remember which one. The Ring, I think. It Follows. Like literally on one hand, I can count how many horror movies I've watched. They've all been with people in a group setting. And I'm like, oh, I didn't hate that. I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it. But it was like being with people in that shared experience where like, I'm not going to play. What reason could I possibly have for wanting to do that alone? Like, I got plenty of other things that make me feel bad every day. I don't need a video game to also do it. Nick, you're not really a survival horror guy. Like you said, you're like into Dark Souls, which is definitely creepy. Bloodborne, definitely creepy.
Yeah, I just haven't been to, I don't know, the gameplay loop of it hasn't seemed appealing to me, I guess.
Well, it's kind of, we've talked about Last of Us so much in the podcast, and those are really the only two survival horror games I've actually played. And that was just because the narrative was so compelling. I felt obligated to get through it.
Yeah, those did or the first one, the one I played, it did absolutely nothing for me.
Sure.
Gameplay wise.
Well, anyway, have you finally been putting in some work on that Switch backlog of yours?
I'm always, kind of poking around at it. I finished Metroid Prime, which we'll talk about. eventually.
We actually will. We actually will, unlike God of War. So sorry, Drew. I wanted to talk about it, man.
I love you, Drew, but that podcast is dead.
I'm going to fully blame Chris on this one. All right, I'm not taking over the team here.
It's only because you guys have the memory of a goldfish and cannot remember anything that happened in that game at this point.
I took
Apparently.
detailed notes, dude. I'm always ready, man.
I've been playing hella other stuff. I don't know. I'm
I
just like
know.
I'm better when it's fresh.
I know.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, for me, it's just I've been playing a few indie games, like starting stuff up, seeing how it feels. One game that I did actually get all the way through is an indie game called Blue Fire. It is a 3D platformer with some action elements. It was really nice. It's a nice game. It's a good game. It's not like fantastic. It's not going to sit in my pantheon of must plays, but if you have the urge for some 3D platformer action, I would recommend it. It feels really nice. It's got a good sort of progression in the abilities that you're getting. It's got these challenge rooms a la Mario Odyssey or even like the shrines in Breath of the Wild. I don't know what you would call that sort of design philosophy, but it's got like a connected world, but then there's these bespoke little arenas where you're doing a specific task. And, it's kind of even back to Sunshine with the levels without flood. I don't know where that originates from, but that's just sort of my touchstones with it.
Sounds very Bubsy 3D.
Yeah, it's it's a Bubsy like
Bubsy like.
You heard it here
that old
first
genre.
on the Console Crusade podcast. Bubsy like.
Bubsyvania. And it's got you get a double jump, you get an air dash, you get a wall run, it's all the stars are here. But yeah, it was a fun time. EJ, I think you might like it. It's got sort of some of it also reminds me, I mean, it's the cell shading and like the character sort of dimensions, like the very short legs and the big head, but it's very reminiscent of Wind Waker and some of the vibes. So if you want to get some like Wind Waker meets Hollow Knight, I guess, because it's kind of goth vibes, then it's not like in aspects of its gameplay, but just in like the way it makes you feel and like some of the musical choices it makes. I think that's sort of some of their that was on their mood board, I think.
This is Hollow Knight looking as fuck. And now I'm reminded also, Nick, that you recommended this to me.
Yeah, I did. As I was playing it, I was like, yeah, I think Chris would probably enjoy this. I also recommended to you Death's Door, which I don't know if we ever really talked about on this podcast, but that was something I played last year. That was like a nice sort of top-down Zelda-like, more combat-focused, more akin to something like Hyper Light Drifter, but also a pretty nice soundtrack. A little bit more Ghibli, like dark Ghibli in its vibe and tone. I don't know how effective that is in actually portraying to you how the game is, but I get kind of tired of just hearing people say, this is what you do in the game. And I just sort of think about games in my past based on like the feelings that I had from them and like trying to communicate those in that way, I guess. And then I've sort of been playing around with some N64. I was playing Majora's Mask and I got through the first temple, and Majora's Mask is a game that I would like to finish at some time because I really love Ocarina of Time. Like that's a important game to me. And I've gone back and I've started that game before, and like, that scratched the itch that gave me enough to sort of get the feelings back. But Majora's Mask is a game that I never finished, and I feel like
It's very different.
it's a game I should.
Right.
Yeah, totally different. And like just the loop of it is less pick up and play. Like it's a game that's hard to get back to after not playing it for a while. So it feels like a game that I should just marathon through and push all the way through. I can't really stop because then I won't know what I was doing. Whereas Ocarina of Time, you don't really need to know what you were doing because Navi's just going to tell you what to go do. And like, you're not missing too much by not doing it. Yeah, I mean,
Listen.
for a game that's like the first like adventure game in 3D, like they had to take some pretty big shortcuts in player hints. Like I could forgive that.
Nick, you just unlocked for me that I have in fact not played two console Zeldas. I have also never finished Majora's Mask. I'm hearing maybe that's a game diary.
I would probably emulate the 3DS version at that point. Well, maybe I would even buy the 3DS version again and try to play it on there.
I'd probably buy it, yeah, just to have my trophies.
We'll see.
We should do that though. Seriously, we should do that. And like EJ, if you bounce off it, fine. That's your contribution is you bounced off it, and we'll hear you like rant and rave about why you bounced off it, and that's fine. Like I don't want you to. I'm not asking you to play anything for a while after you committing to completing Metroid Prime.
I got to train these muscles, man, because if we're going to start doing game reviews on the internet for people to hear proper reviews, which will then, impact how we do the podcast, not just like me rambling for 18 minutes about nothing specific about South Park. Like, I'm going to have to play games, and sometimes that means I'm not going to love the game, but I get your meaning. Like, yeah, I don't really want to spend the majority of my time doing things I'm not enjoying, because I do enough of that in my day-to-day that, my leisure time should be spent doing something I like.
The majority of the time?
I want to play a song so I can go back in time so I can not hear that.
I feel like I know Majora's Mask isn't really for me. It's like it's a little obtuse and it's tedious, but I understand why it is so beloved, because it did something so unique and so interesting with so little. Because it was an asset flip basically. They made it in a year or whatever. They said, okay, instead of just like plopping you in this quote unquote amazing world, like let's really dig deep on an exciting gameplay mechanic and build it around that, which I respect a hell of a lot more than what Zelda has mostly just done for 20 some years in the 3D space, which has mostly been really fucking boring to me. So, but I'm shocked you've never beaten it.
I'm going to guide it for sure, just as an aside, because I know that I'm going to get frustrated. And that's, I think, why I stopped that summer of 16 when I was doing so many Zeldas. I got, maybe not even a third of the way through it and was like, I'm fucking confused. I'm fucking lost. I don't know what I need to do. So I'm just going to guide it this time.
Me and a Metroid game.
Yeah, I mean, this Majora's Mask is not really, from what I remember, because I've only gotten as far as the second like real dungeon and finished that, I believe. So I'm not as far as I've gotten in the past before, but it's not a game that you really need a guide for. If you've played a Zelda game, you should be able to, figure it out and get your way through it. It's more of you would want a guide if you want to get all the masks.
Chris?
Because that is not something that you would sort of stumble your way into.
You got to get the Fierce Deity mask. Like, have you really beaten Majora's Mask if you don't have all the masks? I ask you this.
I mean, maybe the only way you've beaten is if you've beaten it without all the masks. Maybe if you're a real gamer, you won't need the Fierce Deity mask and give yourself easy mode. That stupid worm fight or whatever you need that for.
Wow.
But yeah, I would like to continue playing Majora's Mask. But I mean, I'm torn between more recent games, and then I also started at Metroid Fusion to feel that out again, and that's such a great game. So I've already gotten myself into the second sector. So it's like, no, I'm not going to replay Fusion for the millionth time. Like I should actually play something I haven't played before, as opposed to the comfortable thing that I know that I've done.
You should play whatever makes you feel the best after a long day at work, even if that's replaying the same thing again.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of the time I just end up playing nothing, and then it's like, well, now what do I have to show for my leisure time?
Scrolling on Facebook or Twitter is a lot easier, or Reddit is a lot easier than actually actively doing things. I know. I am guilty of wasting hours doing nothing.
Yeah, and like a little bit of that is fine, but if I can train myself to not be as idle, then
right.
I mean, sure, playing a video game, it is like the peak of being idle, but it's a lot more engaging, and I find it more validating and rewarding than like, how good do you feel after a 3-hour session of scrolling on your phone? You're basically sitting at a baseline, but after a 3-hour session of a video game, I feel like I've accomplished something in that game, which, it's tricking a different part of my brain, but that's just, as I've heard before, that's just what emotions are. It's just brain chemicals.
Well, and scrolling is also part of why it's so fucking damaging and destructive. Social media is because it never activates the reward center. There's never any moment as you scroll through social media where the reward centers of your brain activate, give you a hit of dopamine and tell you did the thing. So you can just doom scroll forever.
No, it's the opposite. It's constant dopamine, which is a very bad thing.
I disagree completely, and I think the science disagrees completely with that. Like that.
Hey, I listen to Andrew Huberman, okay? I just deep dived on this particular topic like last month.
I don't know
right?
who the fuck that is, but
he's a neuroscientist.
Okay, well, good for fucking him. Okay, fine, whatever. But there's no point in which it's like, okay, it's done. Like you have done a task. You could literally just keep doing it forever, and your brain will never go, okay, we did the thing. You can stop.
It's the worst Ubisoft checklist of all time.
Well, you're right about it being a baseline. Like you're always right here. And the way I look at scrolling is like a drug addict or an alcoholic who's like, yeah, you can keep drinking, but at some point you're not feeling good anymore. That those dopamine hits aren't doing what they're supposed to do. You're just maintaining. It's like eating a bag of potato chips. It is not nutritious. It is not filling. You love that you're eating it, but when you're done eating it, you're like, A, I want more, and B, like I'm not satisfied. You know, that's social media. I get it. Whereas a game, you are working towards something and you are achieving a task and you feel good because you did the thing. And that's what makes games unique in a way that like, because some people will be like, oh, turn the games off. You should go read a book. I mean, they are different, but like, how is a book better than playing a fucking video game?
Very different. Not comparable at all. Not comparable at all. There is a certain sense of satisfaction of finishing a book, and I don't know. You know, it's the mental movie for me where like, you know, reading is great. In a way that like a video game is going to play that movie for me, but I am going to make that movie myself while I am reading it just unintentionally in my subconscious, whatever I visualize.
I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm saying the people who
claim
have
it
that.
is.
Yeah, it's like a video game is engaging so many parts of your brain at any given time.
Yeah, it's a lipstick take for sure. Very flaccid take to be like, go read a book. It's like, okay, well, yeah, it is cold take, ice cold.
This just totally reminded me, you guys getting all philosophical. We recently received an email.
Whoa, no way.
Yes. I don't get these, and I gotta turn alerts on.
Remember, you, dear listener, can reach us at feedback@consolecrusade.com.
Yeah.
Again, feedback@consolecrusade.com. Maybe this mystical Nate can show himself, or maybe this is just a beautiful mind creation of Chris's. We don't know. This Nate person could be a pure fiction. We don't know. Anyway, I shall read this to you. Hello, Console Crusade podcast. I am an avid gamer and have been playing video games for as long as I can remember. Recently, I have been hearing a lot about how video games can be addictive and have negative effects on mental health. While I understand the concern, I find myself questioning the validity of this claim. Are video games truly addictive, or is it just a matter of personal responsibility and self-control? I believe that video games are just like any other form of entertainment, such as watching movies or reading books. People have the ability to enjoy them in moderation and without any negative consequences. However, there are some who argue that certain video games are designed to be addictive and can have negative impact on mental health, especially in young people. So my question for your podcast is, are video games truly addictive, or is it a matter of personal responsibility and self-control? I am interested to hear your thoughts on this topic and any research or studies that support either side of this argument. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing your insights. Best regards, ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. Okay.
I asked ChatGPT to send us an email, and that was what they spit out.
This is fucking hilarious. Not only how insanely topical this accidentally was, because I didn't know this existed. We just went on this tangent. That's amazing. I like that it says the AI wants research or studies to support either side of the argument. Well, we ain't got none of that for you, Mr. Robot. But
halfway through this email, I was like, okay, Tiffany, I get it. I'll stop playing Hades so much. Like just fucking text me next time.
Okay, the robot asked a good question. Let me answer your question with a question, sir.
Oh,
or
good.
madam.
Don't know. God, don't do that.
Okay, listen. Asking if a video game is addictive is like asking if food is addictive.
No, because we can't live without food.
No.
What the fuck kind of metaphor is that, Age?
Some foods are addictive via several chemical processes. Some foods can be addictive if, like it said, a self-control thing. Some games are designed to like literally get that boomer brain going and just smack in the freaking slot machine over and over. Yeah, some games are designed like that. But by and large, I think it's a ridiculous thing. And people ask those. I know that's a robot who asked that question, but listen, that is something that people ask, and they want to demonize video games in this very broad way.
And it only ever comes up when somebody with a automatic assault rifle has fucking killed people that they want to bring up, like, oh, video games are addictive. Looking at you, then Senator Hillary Clinton. It's always to obfuscate some other conversation that's happening, like defunding mental health resources when Ronald Reagan closed the mental hospitals. And we've never gone back to like proper like supporting of mental health care for people, or when there's a mass shooting and they want to pin it on someone other than the fucking NRA and the like mass distribution of guns through this kind of like 3 guns to every human. I think like the ratio of like owned guns in the United States is, but they need somebody to pin it on, and video games are a great boogeyman because boomers don't understand it.
This is actually something that I was talking about just at the end of last year with a guy that I know and work with. And he recently had a kid, his first, and he's like low key, pretty traditional guy. He's religious, and I know he's conservative, and he works in a very liberal industry. So it's always kind of funny to sort of read between the lines and see where he's coming from, even though he's not very forward about this kind of things. He's definitely a gun guy. He's always packing. He's always got a concealed carry.
Why on earth? You work in the same industry. This guy's like an audio video editor.
No, music,
and he feels like as if a fucking gun on him at all times. Write a fucking song about it. Grow a pair. Grow the fuck up, and stop pretending like that makes you a real fucking man. Just grow up.
Don't get me wrong. I am definitely a proponent of concealed carry. I've got no problem with it. I definitely think we need more checks and balances, but that's a whole different conversation for a different podcast. But we had this conversation because I talk a lot about, like, as cool as he is and like we are, and like we talk, but at the end of the day, like, it is very much a client relationship kind of thing, right? And so there are these boundaries that, like, you're not kicking the walls down because, sometimes you smile and nod and vice versa, right? But I always sort of got this silent judgment from him. And this is a guy who grew up on the Smash Bros. And the Mario Karts, and we've talked about video games, but he is like very anti-video game in his quote unquote old age. He's like 28 or 29. But he's been married since he was fucking 20, like one of those guys, like, what I'm talking about, right? And so it's not exactly a holier than thou thing, but it is kind of like a, dude, you're 30, you're playing video games. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm playing fucking video games.
Yeah, you're 28 years old and you feel like you have to have a fucking pistol in your pants at all times. Like, pot calling the kettle, baby. Pot calling the kettle.
Yeah, it's a little weird, and everyone finds their meaning in different places, and everyone lives the life, hopefully, that they want to live, whatever. That's if whatever gets his rocks off. I think about some of the best times that I had as a kid, and it is playing games, and not playing games by myself. I don't have any of these grand moments that I can recall that I was sitting alone in a bedroom playing games. It is the way games were an avenue for me to connect with people, whether that was me and my little brother, or whether that was me and my best friends. Nick and I, we always talk about, building blanket forts and, running Mario Kart. And of course, we all have a night playing Smash Bros. And whatever the fuck. And I said something to the effect of, without totally being up in his business, but something to the effect of like I hope your baby like grows up to like enjoy video games like the way that you did. And he's very much, we limit screen time, even passively. Like, we're not a video game family. And I'm like, even this kid grew up on video games. And I don't know why he became so demonized. But I said, what's the difference between playing a certain kind of game and reading a book? And not to mention that a kid needs to learn how to exist in a digital age, and to be like, oh yeah, like no screen time. He's going to have to learn all those things, or he's going to be a fucking boomer. You can't have that. But anyway, there was a study that was done and released by the National Institute of Health. It was probably November last year, but it talks about how video games look to be associated with better cognitive performance in children. And it completely makes sense, right? You're reading, you're problem solving, like you're engaging all these different parts of your brain simultaneously. The audio visual aspect alone, it completely makes sense. And that, I think the study was like a few thousand children that they looked at, right? Of course, you can cherry pick data and look at any study that supports what you want to say, but like the research is finally being done, on these things. And instead of, video games make people violent, You know, it's not the fact that we're like putting machine guns in children's hands for Christmas cards. It's the video games, right?
Yeah, and not to like wax too philosophically about this, because I mean we've been chatting for a minute, and it's been a great conversation. Don't get me wrong. That was what, and listeners, most listeners know. I'm a theater maker. That's what I do for a living. Is I make art in a visual medium. I train artists in a visual medium, actors, directors. Games are what unlocked my creative imagination in a big way. And I don't think I would have the dramatic imagination that I do now if it wasn't for things like Metroid Prime, like dropping me into this world and letting me like soak it up and learn about it, and how you build a world in a way that someone comes and interacts with it and wants to know more about it and wants to dive deeper into it. And I mean, I have a I have a box, I guess, for lack of a better term, full of all of my handwritten Metroid fan fiction from when I was in fucking middle and high school.
Oh no.
And
no.
But first of all, like, oh no and hell yeah, those are both incredibly true statements. Like, let me just say that first and foremost. But fast forward to me, my last year of college, and I'm a produced playwright for the first time. Like, that is a dotted line that goes directly from me writing all this fucking handwritten Metroid fan fiction, and that is a dotted line that goes directly back to me playing Metroid Prime on the Nintendo GameCube and having a moment of like me sitting alone in my bedroom and playing this game and just being like, God damn, I didn't know it could be like this. So I'm not surprised at all to hear those things, and I'm glad to hear those things. And I know that there is value in limiting screen time, if for no other reason than the internet is a horrible fucking place.
Oh, sure.
And
developing good habits and like interacting with anything in your life in a healthy manner, like, sure. But to villainize any particular aspect of the things you're interacting with,
it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Yeah, especially for a fucking concealed carry 2A, don't tread on me, fucker.
I'm triggered, Chris. This is where we find out just how far left really is.
Look, my fucking smart car is named Bernie. Draw your own conclusions.
Hey, man, I imagine you and I have voted very similar over the last decade.
I bet we have.
I'm still pro 2A, and it's funny, a lot of that nuance gets lost. But it's funny how like you hear that this person I was talking to is a certain way, and you fill in the gaps, and you're like not far off. Like that's the part where you're like, that's a little absurd that you could just sit there and just Tetris your way into this guy's personality, and you're like, oh yeah, it's pretty close.
We all know that guy.
Right.
We're all from Gresham, fam. We know like 6 of that guy.
I work with an entire company of that guy.
He's not quite the caricature that a lot of those guys are.
That's because you have a working relationship with them, but if you were to argue with them on the internet, then it would probably turn into a different thing.
Oh, man.
Anyway, really quick, I just wanted to chime in and say that it's disingenuous at best to compare video games to other consumed media like books and movies because they are interactive. And EJ, you mentioned it earlier yourself that there are many games that are just the slot machine that you're just pressing the button to spin the wheel and see what you get. And I think there needs to be research into what kind of effects those have on the brain, because if it is to the extent that a gambling sort of interaction is, then I think it should be under more scrutiny.
Totally.
But also I agree that with what Chris is saying, that the ones that have the desire to police these things more strictly also are coming from a place of bad faith. So it's going to have to be a self-regulation kind of thing for it to be something that I would be approving of. And we're seeing that a little bit now where the ESA, who is in charge of the ESRB, which is the not government mandated but self-regulatory ratings board, is trying to enforce a stricter ratings on games that have what could be perceived as gambling elements like loot boxes and the like. Something that you could give real money for to get a thing that you don't know what you're going to get should be a restricted element in a game. And I think that is not too crazy to say, but we've also grown up in a a culture that trading cards and like random card packs are like weirdly just accepted, even though like a Skinner box is gambling, but it also isn't like legally. So it's like, haha, it's not legally gambling. So yeah, little kid, you can buy this Pokemon pack and maybe you'll crack a Charizard and you'll feel those good juices, and maybe you won't, but you'll still have the desire to crack more because that's the loop. And that is concerning. But I also, there's multiple aspects, like the addictive video games and the way that video games interact with your brain and chemicals and violent tendencies and like the desire to interact with violence. I don't know how much correlation there is there, and there's studies supporting and like saying it's not true. So like you said, EJ, you could find any study that supports whatever belief you have, but I don't think that's like a reason to stop looking into it. So there's just a lot of things we don't know with how brains work and how video games interact with them, because we're interacting with the video games too. But all that to say, I think there should be more regulation as far as the gambling aspects of video games. But at what point does some slimy politician say, oh, if a game has any random chance in it whatsoever, then it's gambling? Like, then what, Dragon Quest is gambling because there's random encounters? Like, you could really take that to the logical conclusion and make it so that every video game is gambling, and then they're just getting money off of it because that's what they want. They want more money.
Are you paying per encounter though? I mean, like obviously, like that's kind of a.
You paid $60 to buy the game.
Well, yeah, but I mean that's a disingenuous argument. Like loot boxes are like pretty demonstrably slot machines.
Or there's free to play games where you're not actually buying spins, you're buying chances to surpass the ad because they're ad based games. Like it's all different fucky ways to try and convince you to get your money, but it's also just wasting your time. Like time is money, and time wasters are, it's very circular, and people will try to surpass the system in any way they can. And yeah, there are definitely, I mean, just talking about how Majora's Mask or Metroid Prime or any of these games that we play that inspire our creativity and make us want to exist in a different location, that's all well and good, but those aren't the only video games. There's also, cookie clicker and weird bullshit on mobile that are just there to extract your time or your money. So we can't paint with the same broad brush that the people we are saying we don't like do in saying that all games are good. So it's a nuanced sort of topic, and
Right.
It's difficult to really have a cohesive one-size-fits-all approach to it.
Well, and the same questions have been asked about television. They've been asked about film. They've been asked about fiction, literature. They've been asked about the stage. Like
rock and roll.
Elvis was shaking his hips and people were talking about how America was coming undone at the seams. It's a timeless conversation, and I imagine video games will not be the last thing we talk about. I mean, right now on the news, in between Donald Trump getting arrested, they're talking about, how TikTok should be banned,
I mean, it might. There's a few legs for that argument to actually stand on, the TikTok thing. I don't want to get into the TikTok thing. I don't want to get into it on this podcast, but like that is actually legitimately a question that should be asked at this moment in time. But that's not the subject of this podcast. It's video gaming. Nick, how dare you introduce nuance into this conversation? Like, God forbid we.
Hey, don't blame me. Blame the AI.
That's true. Like Chat
there's a
GPT,
robot.
they're coming for us all. And maybe that's the moral of the story: is we should just prepare for the domination of our robot overlords.
Well, I'll tell you what, Chris, I know you guys probably both have to go here. So I guess I'll wrap this up. I was gonna tell a story about how I've been listening to old episodes of the podcast, but that can wait until we're in person together this weekend, which in 4 short days, the entire group chat will be together. I am hauling a metric fuck ton of recording gear so that we can talk Mario movie. And then I don't know, who knows how the weekend is going to go. Maybe we split off. We can talk about X, Y, and Z. Maybe we can do this, do that. Maybe we just put them up around the kitchen and we like don't even formally chat. We just kind of hang out and see what comes of it. I can edit it down.
If you want to do that, you fucking go for it. I just wanted to put on air so that there's a little pressure on us that I was promised a rewatch of the 1980s Mario film so that we could do a compare and contrast.
Oh my God.
Actually, I believe that came out in 1990.
What the fuck ever?
93. Wow, that was even later than I thought.
That is
Wow,
later.
really? No, that's wild. I was wrong as fuck. Thank you.
Dude, those boots are in Face Off. In the prison. Such a good movie.
I haven't watched that movie since John Aldrich and I bought a copy at a Walmart for $5 and watched it one night.
Face Off rules.
I think my
Mario
mom-
movie rules.
I think Mom has the Mario Brothers movie on DVD. I could just borrow it from her, probably.
Well, in any event, we'll have to figure out where it's streaming or find a copy of it. But in any event, we'll be together. We'll get some podcast content out of it. So whatever comes of that, that'll be fun. Mario movie impressions have been pretty positive.
No, they have not.
We are apparently looking in very different places. Everybody that I follow has basically been like, it is a really fun movie. Kids and adults are both going to enjoy it. Chris Pratt has been villainized. So we'll see if that's the case.
The audience score is like 50%.
Yeah,
That's
I was gonna
insane.
say it is getting crucified on Rotten Tomatoes. Like audience and critic reviews have been horrible. Chris Stuckman, to his credit on YouTube, who's somebody who generally like his takes align with my own takes, has said like he felt comparable to it about Sonic. He's like, it's not great. It's good. I am glad that it exists. I enjoyed myself. And that's all I could really ask for. But no, the critical consensus has not been positive at all.
Wow. Well, see, I didn't know the review embargo lifted. All I had saw was all of the out of theater reactions 2 days ago. And I was like, this is pretty positive.
I have expectations that are totally fine. I just want to hear some good music and to have the Leonardo DiCaprio moments, which that's all I'm expecting.
Yes, Leo meme. I literally said that to my buddy where it's like, I'm just here for the Leo meme moments where I'm like, Easter egg, Easter egg, Easter egg.
I just don't understand what people want out of animated films. So I'll be curious to go into this as someone who like generally doesn't like cartoons anyway, because they all are like pretty shitty in general. You know, I haven't watched a Pixar movie that's meant a goddamn thing to me in I don't know how long. It's just fucking cartoons. So yeah, I'll be curious to go into it. I did not realize the reviews embargo had lifted and they were that bad. So anyway, we'll see. This is going to be so funny. Chris and I are just going to fucking tear this movie apart on Saturday. Like,
I'm going to love it. I'm probably going to cry. I'm probably going to cry more than once. Just of like, goddamn, look at this cool ass thing they did. Like they're fucking doing Mario Kart on Rainbow Road. That's fucking dank. Like
yeah.
The Lynchian way they approach Rainbow Road.
Don't
You
get me
know
started.
what?
Chris and I might come to blows.
Just because I have David Lynch's dick 4 inches down my throat doesn't mean that
Ow!
I am always going to cite that.
Look, that was less of a dig at you and more of a dig at the way EJ perceives you.
Not you, Chris, but
It's
Lynch
column A,
fans in
column
general.
B. Column A, column B.
this is the Cause of Crusade podcast.
Love it. Wrap it up in a bow.
4 inches. Like, give the man some credit. God damn, Chris.
He's like 85, 86. How much could he possibly still have?